Good morning, Wabash. This week's speaking is Professor Richard Warner. Professor Warner is in his 17th year teaching here at Wabash College. He chairs the History Department and Asian Studies program, works as faculty secretary, and prepares delicious soups for the social science colloquia. Professor Warner teaches courses in Latin American, African, and world history, as well as his freshman tutorial, Food in the Liberal Arts. He serves as the president of the World History Association and is on the board of directors of the Montgomery County Free Clinic. Here with his talk titled, How to Wage Peace, Professor Richard Warner.
Thank you, Ryan, for the invitation. Thank you, my Sphinx Club brothers. Nice-looking class of Ryans. I can see from the suits that today is not the day for me to call and narrate. So I will not. And thank you, everybody, for coming to talk to me, to listen to me. So I've got a birthday coming up. I just thought I'd let you know, in case you want to get me a present. Actually, you've got plenty of time, since my birthday is not until July. But it's an important birthday, one of those that ends in a 0. Yes, it's true. I'll be turning 30 years old this July. Okay, so that's half true. I'll be turning 60, and I remember the words of my retired colleague, John Fisher, when he reached this plateau. Child. The people in the back know this. Child, this one really kicks you in the rear. And so it does. I have a Chinese friend who tells me that turning 60 in China is a big deal. A 60-year-old is said to have finished a complete life cycle. There can be a real sense of rejuvenation, to say nothing of the gifts and honors that you all are supposed to shower me with. Just kidding. Actually, I've always liked these big milestones because they give me a chance to think reflectively about where I've been, where I want to go, with what remains with my time on this side of the Great Divide. Is an invitation to existential reflection. Today, I'm going to be sharing some deep feelings and thoughts that have been occurring to me recently. I'll warn you, it's probably going to be my most personal chapel talk ever. But thank you for joining me. My title is somewhat misleading because I have worked against war and for peace my whole life, but my focus today is more internal. There's a connection, I hope. Let me give you some personal background. I grew up around Burlington, Vermont, the son of an anti-war activist and a father, and my mother was deeply involved in the civil rights movement. Here's a fun fact. I knew Bernie Sanders when I was a teenager. Since feel the burn. That's the only political statement today. If you want to learn more, see my Facebook wall. Since he was involved with my father in what used to be called the Liberty Union Party. And from Vermont, I moved to California to work as a chef, marry my wife Carrie in a Quaker ceremony among the redwoods. I adopted Quakerism as my faith at that point, and have been guided by its reverence for silence and thirst for peace and justice ever since. While in Santa Cruz, California, probably more interesting to you, I became a part owner of the Poet and Patriot Irish Pub, which still serves a mean pint of Guinness. A good number of my customers are Vietnam War veterans who also gathered in the VFW post in town. They would conduct service trips to Vietnam to build schools and other infrastructure as a way to deal with their guilt that they felt for participating in the war. It was among these guys that I first heard the curious term in this title, wage peace. And since that time, I've often thought about what it means to wage peace, both in a political or outward way and in an inward way. I've come to speak to you today about the inward waging of peace, which I believe makes us better peace wagers in the world. If you remember nothing else from my musings today, please take this one away. Peace is not the absence of war. We must actively seek it within ourselves and between ourselves. So my thesis is that peacemakers need to find peace within before they can do our best work. So, Joe, what is this work, you might ask? Well, waging peace is something that all of us can do. We have the tools inside of ourselves. We just need to set them free. I frankly admit that I have a long way to go to be a better peacemaker. But I want to share what little wisdom I have in my nearly 60 years. That is, after all, what old people do while everyone else is supposed to listen. There are conflicts all around us, internationally, nationally, in our towns, in our families, our relationships, between faculty members, yes, between fraternity members. I could go on for quite a while. Most recently, I've become president of the World History Association, having spent 2 years trying to wage peace as the president-elect and vice president. I learned a new level of patience working with hundreds of faculty members, all of whom seem to have an opinion. Something about this trade. I can report this has gone pretty well. And although I feel like I walked through fire with my colleague president, Craig Benjamin. Anyway, I'm sure you experience conflict in some of your own settings. I know you have. So what can you do to improve your skill at waging peace in these situations? So one strategy is to work to understand the perspective of others who are different from you, if not like it according to opinion, perhaps by social background, different histories. Because when we move out of our comfort zone and we recognize our privilege, the resulting humility can become very powerful in waging peace. One place I've been confronted by my own comfort zone, and where I've seen many of you do so, is on my immersion trips to the developing world. Of the 10 trips I've been on, the most mind-blowing one was with Professor Bill Cook to Kenya. And yep, I hope to go back next year. As we arrived at the Nairobi airport, we were surrounded by thousands of Kenyans, many of whom wanted to sing and dance around us and hug us. Those first hugs were definitely out of the comfort zone of my students. But by trip's end, the students were the ones that are initiating the hugging and had become deeply engaged in Kenyan life. During the course of the trip, we walked through the largest slum in Africa, which is called Kibera. I remember seeing all the plastic shoes on the railroad tracks that bordered the slum. Somehow that reminded me of the shoes in the Holocaust Museum, though the conditions are very different. And although we have many great photographs that were taken by Steve Charles, who we were fortunate enough to have on the trip, he was then told by the guides to conceal his camera while we were walking through Kibera. This is the only place in the developing world that I've been that no one has asked me for money. It's very far from a tourist zone. I should say that we were not in actual danger, thanks to our hosts who were community leaders in Kibera, but our hearts were beating stronger nonetheless. We arrived at a huge church protected by a courtyard where Steve could take out his camera again, and I was asked to say a few words to several hundred people who had gathered in the church. I felt so incredibly humble and selfish for the way that I lived my life. The people we met were very poor, but insisted on finding us a soda pop or a scrap of cake. I felt that my life had changed, and I knew that this was true of my students as well. I wish I could continue that feeling of humility daily, because I know it would make me a better peacemaker. To wage peace, then, is to be willing to let go of your own attachments, including your attachment to your own convictions. This does not mean giving up your convictions, merely trying to understand the lives and the perspectives of others and to take them seriously. I want to turn now to some feelings that are even more internal, if I may. One of the great things that has occurred in my time at Wabash College is the opening up of discussions with regards to gender. When I first arrived, I had the palpable sense that speaking about gender would be interpreted as wanting to open up the question, that is, the co-ed question. I'm happy that this is no longer at anybody's table, and we've healed considerably since then. We embrace our uniqueness in new ways now. The once unthinkable gender studies minor has not only been approved, but appears to be thriving among both faculty and students. Discussions of gender have occurred in many classes organically and planned. A number of my colleagues have been instrumental in this development. including Professors Trott, Rhodes, Shishak Brewer, and Olson. I spoke with the fatherhood class a while back, and I was deeply moved by the discussion among men, about our roles as fathers and as men generally. We still have much to do in this college, but we are making good progress in making a safe environment to talk about masculinity, femininity, sexuality, and so on. I want to add to that discussion today from the perspective that rethinking these matters can help us, especially men, I would suggest, to become better peacemakers. First, I'll offer a moment of honest perspective, one that may not shock some of you. I have some very masculine moments in my life. One of my favorites is watching a Wabash football game, invariably from the sidelines, since I'm a nervous fan. I like to stand there with Frank Kolasek as we watch the collision between our well-trained O-line and the opposite defense. Get out there and hit somebody. Play like you mean it. Come on, dig in. Yes, I yell stuff like that. It's true. It's true. The collision on the line gives way to a small opening. The rhetoric major, history minor, running back plows through, dragging 3 defenders into the end zone with him. Feed the beast. Shout out, Mason. This Wabash football at its best. Wabash always fights, indeed. I learned over the years there's another side to my persona. It can be thought of as a subtle and I think feminine side. It is a quieter, listening side. It is the side I felt in Kenya as I worked in an orphanage with young children. To be honest, I've done what I can to cultivate this side. As you may well know, I carry a pink iPhone as a reminder to search for what the Chinese would call my yin nature. A good friend of mine noticed this side recently and encouraged me in it, saying that it was the princess in my heart. She thought I was offended at first, but I'm not. I was very flattered. I like exploring that other side. It's a bit out of my comfort zone after living nearly 60 years in this male body. For that matter, I'm moving out of my comfort zone at this very moment, trying to explain to a mostly male audience of several hundred people that I want to find my inner woman. But I'm okay with that. Essentially, I'm trying to redefine how I feel as a man, to explore a new sense of masculinity. Wabash always fights, dear to my heart, becomes an internal pathway as I struggle within my own self to be better, to find the peacemaker within. I have Muslim friends who speak of the process of jihad in the same way. It's not a struggle against others for them, but rather a battle for improvement in their own souls. Okay, so that's all pretty philosophical and no doubt a bit mushy for some of you, but I want to speak a little more practically about what I've been doing lately to be able to find my peacemaker within. So we need to silence, let's leave that there. We need to silence the noise in our lives to achieve this state. We're tied to instant communication, instant gratification. We can't make it through a class or a faculty meeting without checking our phones. I've actually gotten texts across the room in a faculty meeting. Shouldn't have said that. So, we're distracted, right? We can't stop the chatter in our brain. We've lost all our appreciation for silence, just as we are losing our connection with nature. So, audience participation time. I want to invite you to do something with me now. This will take a minute of your time, probably less. It's totally optional. I only ask that you remain silent while we do it. Okay? Put your phones away. If you got phones out, sit in a relaxed position. Just normal. So close your eyes, please. Notice your breath. Often we tend to breathe focused on our chest. Try taking some breath where you're focusing on your abdomen. On your exhale, imagine that your breath starts from your abdomen and is slowly pushed up a bit at a time. Do this for a few breaths. If there are still thoughts in your head, try to remove them. Keeping your eyes closed, imagine a snowplow pushing them away. Try to remain without thoughts for a while. Okay, let's open our eyes. Thanks for sharing the silence with me. I end by putting my hands to my heart and saying to you, Namaste, which means, or can mean, I honor the spirit within you. So what we've just attempted in this short exercise is centering ourselves. In a Quaker meeting, we do this for an hour, and often enough, no one will speak out of the silence. I think that you will find that the effect can be very powerful if you practice this daily. For example, as you wake up in the morning before getting out of bed, take some moments to recognize your breath and practice this exercise of clearing your mind. Just try to clear it out. There's plenty of time for stuff to go in it later. So what we've just been doing, by the way, is part of the disciplinary practice called yoga. Now, until last November, I would not have thought to share this, especially from the chapel pulpit. I always thought of yoga class as a place where groups of people, mostly women, would stretch themselves into pretzels. And I'm wrong. So yoga is an ancient tradition that began with men thousands of years ago. And in November, I took a class with 6 other men, which I labeled bro yoga. And with these men, I searched for a different part of myself. And I now practice daily. And I've made some noticeable improvements in my physical, mental, and spiritual life that I'm probably too happy to share if you ever run into me right now. My friends are tired of hearing about it. But in short, I found that I'm listening more to my body, my mind is clear, and my emotions have softened. Oh, and since I'm more centered, I've been eating less and seem to have accidentally lost nearly 25 pounds. So that's not bad. Thanks. Haven't been at Sparks either. That's not true. It's a cheap shot. But when I'm eating, my wife will say, like, "Are you going to eat that roll?" No, you go ahead. Another upside is that my mind is more focused on cooperation than competition. I don't compete with other people in the yoga class, and nor possibly could I. But more importantly, I'm kinder to my own body, and I'm finding my edge in each stretch, as they say. And yoga is a no-judgment zone. I want to suggest that a disciplinary practice like yoga or meditation or Quaker meeting or other things can put us on a path to peace within ourselves, and along with developing empathy for other people, like those we met in Kenya, this can make for better peacemakers. I'm going to close by speaking about a good friend of mine, who I believe was a powerful peacemaker in his day. In my opinion, he's the most influential Wabash man in his generation. His name is Bill Quaker. He graduated in 1970 with Professor Blix and taught religion here until his untimely death 7 years ago. When he succumbed to a heart attack, he was 60. Hence, as I finish my 6th decade, I am thinking about him even more now. I'm sad that Bill's life really did end with the Chinese 60-year cycle 7 years ago. But I feel very blessed to have known him. and I want this community to remember him. I've actually given another talk about him before. Once I gave a chapel talk called War and Peace in Wabash History. It was a collection of stories about Wabash men who distinguished themselves in war, and a few musings about Wabash peacemakers. It was a beautiful spring day as I spoke. Unlike today, the front doors were open, and as I talked, I was pleased to gaze out onto the Green Mall. It was a gorgeous day. At one point in the talk, I was quoting the commencement address that Bill Quaker delivered in May 1970, which many of you have read. As I was speaking his words, I saw someone arriving late to chapel, and indeed, that was Bill Quaker. He was standing back there. I had the most powerful moment of dramatic irony as I had to decide whether to break my rhythm and embarrass him by introducing him, or to continue on. And I chose to continue quoting his words. Don't know why, but I did. Even then, he's just smiling broadly back at me from the door. So Bill's commencement address in 1970 came some 10 days after a shocking tragedy in the Midwest. 4 students were shot dead by National Guardsmen at Kent State University during an anti-war demonstration. Historians of the war will tell you that this was a key turning point for changing middle-class American attitudes about the war. On that warm spring day, in May 1970, Bill Quaker spoke to a crowd out on the mall here that was still shell-shocked by that event. As with many of us, myself included, and I'm certain that I would feel this way, he might well have spoken out of anger, but he did not. And here's part of what he said. Surely it is possible to be patriotic and hate what's happening to the country you love. Possible to hate a war, not out of communism or anarchism, but because it's killing your friends to no good purpose. He concluded his essay this way, his address. I said I would offer no easy answers, and I trust I've kept that promise. The class of 1970 does not enter a world full of nothing but glorious opportunities. But perhaps we'll learn that there are more things to admire in men than to despise. Perhaps, knowing it will never be enough to change the world, we will act more honorably than we expected we would. Perhaps we'll have a lot of fun along the way. It wouldn't be a bad life. As Bill would say, indeed. I continue to find peaceful strength in these words. Bill is still with us. Bill still teaches us. Thank you for listening to my thoughts this morning and allowing me to say once more, namaste, and Wabash always fights.